In the shadowed corridors of Silent Hill, where the boundaries between reality and nightmare blur, one name echoes with chilling resonance: Walter Sullivan. A man whose life and death are intertwined with the dark rituals of the Order, Walter's journey from a tormented child to a cold-blooded murderer is a descent into madness that defies comprehension. Yet with this madness lies a twisted intellect, a mind both brilliant and broken, driven by an obsession that transcends the physical world. Today in Riot's, I still don't even have I don't even know what, villain ranking, Riot's villain ranking, there we go. We're going to delve into the enigma that is Walter Sullivan, using our villain score to dissect the dark genius, the leadership born of fear, the success wrought in blood, and the shattered morality that defines him. Let's do this. Now, the rules here are simple before we get into it. I kind of just grade the villain based on a few different categories, and the categories will be explained here as the first one is intellect. And generally, this is their overall smarts when it comes to being a villain or being a person altogether. The characters run through the ringer while I decide how, when, and where their smarts come into play and just how effective they are. Second category is leadership. This is how well they can actually lead others to get a goal completed or have some sort of army amassed, that sort of thing. The idea that they are just a villain is one thing, but how well can they lead others to follow behind in their example? Category 3 is successes. This is entirely based on their success rate. Yeah, villains exist out there, but how many of those are actually gone through a number of different things and actually taking care of certain jobs? This is put to the test as I take a look at everything they've done in the past and find out exactly just what their success rate is. And then last category is morality. Morality is the last bastion of hope on what they have left connected to the acts of right and wrong, humanity, that sort of thing. Are they a psychopath, or are they calculated and cold, thinking of different ways to get a goal done without not necessarily killing everyone in their path, but most certainly making sure causing the most damage as they can? These 4 categories are put together and then averaged out, and then at the end of the video I give you a nice little overall score for the villain, and we see where they stand against the other villains that I have rated before. Now, for those just walking in and not knowing who Walter Sullivan is, or they just kind of need a refresher course, Walter Sullivan is the central antagonist in Silent Hill 4: The Room. He's a character whose tragic backstory and horrific actions make him one of the most complex figures in the Silent Hill series. He was born in Ashfield. Walter was abandoned as an infant and raised in the Wish House orphanage from a cult known as the Order. This cult, with its dark and twisted beliefs, deeply influenced Walter from a young age and indoctrinated him into an esoteric doctrine and setting the stage for the horrors that he would later unleash. As a child, Walter became fixated on the idea that the room 302 in South Ashfield Heights was his mother. It was a belief stemmed in the trauma of abandonment and the manipulation he experienced at the Wish House. In truth, his mother and father simply abandoned him in an old, dank apartment. This delusion grew into an obsession, driving Walter to commit a series of gruesome murders known as the 21 Sacraments. He believed these killings were necessary to essentially rebirth his mother and bring her back into the world. Walter's life was marked by a descent into madness, and his actions became increasingly detached from reality. His murders were ritualistic, each one meticulously planned and executed according to the teachers that told him how to do this from the Order. Even after his death, Walter's presence lingered, his spirit continuing to haunt Room 302 and the world beyond, blurring the lines between real and supernatural. Walter Sullivan's remembered not just as a murderer, but as a tragic figure, a man whose life was shaped by trauma, manipulation, and a delusional obsession that ultimately consumed him. His story is one of the darkest stories in the Silent Hill series, and it's a tale of a man who became a monster in his desperate quest for love and belonging. His cognitive abilities, shaped by a traumatic upbringing and a profound obsession with the occult, offer a unique lens through which to examine the nature of intelligence as a villain. While Walter's not a conventional genius, his intellect is marked by a deep understanding of arcane rituals, meticulous planning, and a distorted yet coherent internal logic. This first part of the video will explore the facets of Walter Sullivan's intellect, examining how his early life, his knowledge of the Order's teachings, and his execution of the 21 Sacraments ritual reflect his dark genius. Walter Sullivan's intellect was shaped by a series of traumatic experiences during his formative years. Born in the fictional town of Ashfield, Walter was abandoned as a child and raised in a wish house orphanage, a front for the Order, a cult that worships the malevolent deities of Silent Hill. The orphanage served as a breeding ground for indoctrination, where children were subjected to psychological manipulation and abuse under the guise of religious teachings. From a young age, Walter was exposed to the Order's esoteric doctrines, particularly the 21 Sacraments, a gruesome ritual intended to bring about the descent of God into the physical world. These teachings, which emphasized the necessity of ritual sacrifice and the transcendence of death, became the foundation of Walter's intellectual development. His understanding of these complex rituals demonstrated an early capacity for absorbing and internalizing abstract concepts, even if they were twisted by the cult's malevolent influence. This early exposure to the Order's teaching set Walter on a path where his intellect would become inexorably linked to his obsession with completing the 21 Sacraments. As an adult, Walter's intellect manifests most prominently in his meticulous planning and execution of the 21 Sacraments ritual. His ability to carry out a series of ritualistic murders, each with specific symbolic significance, showcases his deep understanding of the Order's teachings and his capacity for strategic thinking. Walter's killings were not a random act of violence. Each was a calculated step in a larger plan to fulfill the ritual and bring the rebirth of his mother, who he believed was to be fairly honest, who he believed to be room 302 in South Ashfield Heights. Walter's knowledge of the occult and his ability to navigate the supernatural aspects of Silent Hill further demonstrate his intellectual prowess. He understood the significance of each victim, the importance of timing, and the symbolic value of the locations where his murders took place. His ability to manipulate the boundaries between the real world and the other world, creating twisted realms that reflected his inner psyche, also speak to his understanding of the occult and the power of his belief. Walter's actions were not driven by brute force or simple malice, but by a deep-seated belief in the necessity of his actions, a belief rooted in the intellectual understanding of the Order's teachings. Despite his intellectual capabilities, Walter Sullivan's mind was ultimately consumed by madness, creating a conflict between his cognitive abilities and his deteriorating mental state. His delusions, particularly his beliefs that room 302 was his mother, and his inability to distinguish between reality and the nightmare world he created, reveal the limitations of his intellect. While he was capable of planning and executing complex rituals, his understanding of the world was filtered through the lens of delusion and paranoia, leading back to actions that were as self-destructive as they were to others. Walter's descent into madness highlights the tragic nature of his intellect. He possessed the cognitive abilities to understand and manipulate the world around him, but his understanding was warped by trauma and indoctrination. His belief in the necessity of the 21 Sacraments, despite the horrific act they required, showed a mind that could rationalize even the most heinous crimes. This internal conflict between intellect and insanity ultimately led him to his downfall, as his obsessive pursuit of the ritual blinded him to the moral and ethical implications of his actions. Fact of the matter was, Walter's intellect was hinging entirely upon his mental stability, and there was a severe lack of that. He was a pawn in a game earlier played by a cult that he had been a part of unwittingly. So, current day and present day, you have Walter Sullivan now tarnished in the mind, believing that this certain ritual will actually bring his mother back. Make no mistake, however, while his intellect was marred by delusion and obsession, it also made him the most terrifying and complex villain in the Silent Hill series. In the end, Walter Sullivan's intellect is both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness, driving him to the heights of dark genius while also leading him into the abyss of madness. This combination of intelligence and insanity is what makes Walter Sullivan so compelling and tragic as a figure, earning him the score of 65 on the villain score for intellect. Leadership in the context of a villain is often associated with charisma, the ability to command followers, and the power to shape events according to one's will. However, in the case of Walter Sullivan from Silent Hill, leadership takes on a more sinister and unconventional form. Walter's leadership is not characterized by a traditional following or the direct exercise of power over others. Instead, his influence is deeply rooted in his ability to manipulate, control, and reshape the very fabric of reality within the world of Silent Hill, making him a leader of fear, madness, and supernatural forces. Walter Sullivan's early life was marked by a traumatic upbringing in the Wish House Orphanage, an institution secretly run by the Order, a cult that worships the malevolent deities of Silent Hill. It was here that Walter was indoctrinated by the teachings of the Order, which would shape his worldview and lay the foundation for his twisted beliefs. Though not a leader within the cult in the traditional sense, Walter became deeply influenced by its doctrines, particularly the concept of the 21 Sacraments, a ritual that promised to bring about his twisted version of salvation. While Walter didn't rise to the position of leadership within the Order itself, his actions were driven by his interpretation of their beliefs, and he became a figure of fear and reverence in his own right. His commitment to carrying out the 21 Sacraments ritual, which required the murder of 21 individuals to complete, demonstrated his leadership over his own fate and the supernatural forces that would become his followers in death. Walter's belief in the righteousness of his main mission allowed him to exert a terrifying influence over the events of Silent Hill, warping the town's reality to fit his nightmarish vision. Walter's leadership is most evident in the way he manipulates the world around him, bending reality to his will by sheer force of belief and supernatural power. After his physical death, Walter's spirit became a much more hostile force within Silent Hill, particularly within Room 302. The place he believed to be his mother. From this vantage point, he exerted control over the twisted version of Silent Hill that he created, a manifestation of his own tormented psyche. This control over the environment is a form of leadership that is both terrifying and profound. Walter's ability to create and manipulate the otherworldly spaces within Silent Hill, such as a haunted subway, the twisted hospital, and the nightmarish prison, demonstrates his dominance over those who enter his domain. He leads not through words or commands, but through the creation of fear and the omnipresent threat of violence. The power he wields is not over people, but over the very reality they inhabit, making him a leader in the most unnerving sense. Furthermore, Walter's influence extends to those he draws into the nightmarish world. The victims of his ritual, as well as those like Henry Townsend, the main protagonist of Silent Hill, who became entangled in his plans, are manipulated and controlled by Walter's unseen hand. The otherworldly creatures that populate this twisted version of Silent Hill act as extensions of his will, forcing his desires and perpetuating the cycle of terror that he has initiated. In this way, Walter's leadership is exerted through the creation of a self-sustaining nightmare, where he remains the puppet master pulling the strings from beyond the grave. Despite his ability to manipulate the world of Silent Hill and exert control over its denizens, Walter Sullivan's leadership is fundamentally limited by his isolation and madness. Unlike other villains who command armies and inspire loyalty, Walter is deeply a solitary figure. His followers are not living beings, but rather manifestations of his own delusion and the supernatural forces he has harnessed. This lack of direct follower or support structure makes Walter's leadership unique, but also tragic. He's a leader of fear and death, but ultimately alone in his quest. Walter's inability to connect with the others on a human level is a key limitation to his leadership. His entire life has been marked by abandonment, first by his parents and then later by the only community he ever knew, the Order. This sense of isolation drove him to madness, leading him to create a world where he could finally exert control, even if the control was over a twisted nightmare. Walter's leadership is, therefore, a reflection of his deep-seated loneliness and desire for connection, tragically expressed through violence and terror. Walter's leadership is unconventional and rooted in fear, manipulation, and control over the supernatural realm of Silent Hill. His ability to shape reality and create a nightmarish world demonstrates profound influence, but his leadership is ultimately limited by his isolation and madness. He doesn't command armies or inspire loyalty in followers. Instead, his followers are manifestations of his own delusions and the supernatural entities he controls. His tragic inability to connect with the others on a human level diminishes his leadership as well. Therefore, I'm going to give him a 70 for leadership. In the end, while he can lead, it still circles back to him. Walter, in the end, is lonely, and it shows. In the realm of villainy, success is measured not merely by the execution of the evil plan, but the lasting impact those plans have on the world and with the people in it. For Walter Sullivan, success was intimately tied to his obsessive pursuit of the 21 Sacraments ritual. A series of gruesome murders he believes will reunite him with his mother, a twisted conception of a room where he was born. While Walter's journey is marked by a mix of achievements and failures, his successes reveal the depth of his influence and the terrifying power he wields over Silent Hill. Walter Sullivan's primary goal in Silent Hill 4 was to complete the ritual, which involves the murder of 21 individuals, which we discussed already, but each of them represented a specific role in the ritual. Walter's belief that this ritual will bring him closer to his mother drives him to meticulously planning out where he executes any of these killings, often in ways that are symbolic or deeply connected to his own traumatic past. His success in carrying out most of these murders is a testament to his own determination and sheer force of his will, despite being, let's be honest, fairly disturbed. Walter's victims range from strangers who have played a role in a tragic upbringing, each death serving to further his cause. The success of these killings is not only measured by the number of lives he takes, but by the fear and chaos they spread throughout Silent Hill. The murders disrupt the fabric of reality in the town, causing it to warp and twist into a nightmarish version or reflection of Walter's psyche. In this sense, Walter's success is not limited to the physical act of killing, but extends towards a broader sense. Walter's impact he has around the world at this point. The very environment of Silent Hill becomes a manifestation of his inner torment, a place in which the boundaries between life, death, reality, and illusion are officially blurred. Walter's influence over Silent Hill extends far beyond the murders themselves now as well. His actions fundamentally alter the town, creating an otherworld that is uniquely his own. As compared to the other Silent Hills you've seen before, he's inventing a version of the otherworld or Silent Hill. It's a disturbing realm where reality is distorted by Walter's memories, fears, and desires, and it serves as a prison for his victims and anyone unfortunate enough to cross his path. The success of Walter's ritualistic killings is evident by his pervasive and inescapable horror that engulfs Silent Hill as a result. For every person that he kills, Silent Hill actually changes, and you can see it in-game. One of the most notable aspects of Walter's success is the creation of Room 302 as a focal point of his power. The room, which Walter sees as his mother, becomes a conduit for the otherworld, trapping the protagonist Henry Townsend and drawing him into Walter's twisted reality. The room is both a physical and metaphysical place, representing Walter's deep-seated need for connection and his desire to escape the loneliness and pain of his existence. The success of Walter's influence over Room 302 is such that it becomes a character in its own right, a living entity that reflects Walter's disturbed mind and serves as a heart of the game's horror. Despite the considerable success Walter achieves carrying out the 21 Sacraments, his story ultimately ends in failure. Henry Townsend, the game's protagonist, manages to disrupt Walter's plans and prevent the completion of the final sacrament. Walter's inability to achieve his ultimate goal, his reunion with his mother, casts a shadow over his previous successes, transforming what could have been a triumphant culmination of his life's work into a tragic and incomplete endeavor. This failure, however, does not negate the significance of Walter's earliest achievements. The terror he unleashed on Silent Hill, the lasting impact of his actions on the town's reality, and the psychological scars he leaves on his victims are all testaments of the success of his evil plan. In this way, Walter's story is both success and failure, a complex narrative that underscores the tragic nature of his character. Walter Sullivan's successes in the room are marked by his ability to carry out the majority of his 21 Sacraments and his profound influence over the town of Silent Hill, so I will be giving him a score of 70. His ritualistic killings, the creation of a personalized otherworld, and the terror he spreads are significant achievements enough on their own right. But the ability to manifest Silent Hill into an image or an afterthought that you've conjured up yourself is an entirely different testament of his power and usefulness to this entire ritual. Walter Sullivan's morality is probably the most complex and tragic aspect of his character in this entire game, or any other Silent Hill game. His journey from a traumatized child to a remorseless killer highlights a profound moral decay shaped by his traumatic upbringing, twisted beliefs, and descent into madness. To fully understand the depth of Walter's moral corruption, one must delve into the key moments of his life and the influences that pushed him over the edge. You have to understand, Walter Sullivan's early life was marred by neglect, abuse, and indoctrinations, and it set the stage for the moral decline right from the beginning. Born in the eerie town of Silent Hill, Walter was abandoned as a baby, left for the Wish House orphanage. You've heard this whole song and dance. However, what you learn in Silent Hill 4 is that an old fan favorite, Dahlia Gillespie, is actually the reason behind his adamant attitude on getting the 21 Sacraments complete, as she was conditioning Walter, as well as a number of other children, in order for them to go and perform all these misdeeds and things of that sort, so that they can kind of spread their name and throughout the town and every other subsequent town they end up at. The humanity portion of Walter had deteriorated to nothing before he even became an adult. And that was simply because there was only one or two people to trust, and that was the Order, and then there was himself. There was no one else out there, and then as soon as the Order proved to be useless in making sure that they could find some way to bring his mother back, he just took matters into his own hands. He cut ties from everyone. The only thing showing a sign that he was any form of human anymore, even after his death and becoming a spirit, was his natural instinct to see his mother. And that was about the only human thing left. However, it became a perverted and contorted version of what it was supposed to be and how it normally is. He did not care. There was no concern anymore, and all there was finding his mother. And while the idea and the plan was going pretty well, he had no care or caution or concern for anyone else. Yes, he was a murderer. Yes, he was sacrificing people, but there wasn't even a reluctant part of him doing it. There wasn't a part of him that had pity for these people or anything like that. They were simply a means to an end to get his mother back, and that was all that mattered. So for that, I can easily, and this will be the smallest part of the video by far, I can easily give him a 20 for humanity, as the only part of humanity that stuck around for him was being a child to his mother. And his mother was a room, so that should tell you just how far that was going. Well, folks, with that, it looks like we can finally tally everything up and see what we've come to the conclusion of. It looks like we're going to give old boy Walter a good old-fashioned 75 on the score, on the Riot's villain rank score thing. It's still a tentative title. I'll get back to you about that. But the villain ranking for this guy is 75. I felt that ultimately, no matter what, the only thing he was truly missing was humanity due to his lack of connection to anyone. And while some would look at that as a weakness, he actually used that as a tool to heighten the power he had over Silent Hill. But what do you think? Why don't you pop over in the comments and tell me what your opinion is on the matter. In the meantime, I have mine. And if you have a moment, I would go take a look at the playlist. I have a villain ranking playlist where you can take a look at the other villains I ranked to see what was going on with them and what scores I gave them and all that good stuff. But yeah, I think that's a suitable one. I figured I'd do a Silent Hill villain because I'm back on my Silent Hill bullshit because, we got the Part 2 remake coming out, which I will be playing for you guys, and we'll get all that shaken down later on next month, I do believe. So we have, 35 days left or something like that, which is forever. All right, guys, it's been real. I'm out of here. I appreciate you for popping in and all the new subscribers we got as of late, not to mention all the new patrons. You guys have been killing it right now. So we're going to be well on our way to doing some serious damage in the subscription department. We're almost at 2,500. I'm looking forward to that. I'll see you guys in the next video and everything else. I'll figure out a good tagline at the end. Maybe I'll play a song or something. Yeah, let's do that. We'll play the theme song right now, and then I'll say something witty that closes out the video, and it goes to Patreon. That's how I'm going to do that. Okay. So the song should be playing right now, and then I'll say something like, oh, I know.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross